Greetings, enthusiasts! You are tuned into Simplified Topics, your one-stop channel for making complex subjects easy and fun. Today, we're going to unravel the mysteries of an unsung hero of the culinary world, yeast. Yeast, my friends, is a tiny, single-celled organism that belongs to the fungus family. Yes, you heard it right, fungus! But don't let that deter you. This little marvel is responsible for some of the most delicious things we eat every day. I mean, who doesn't love the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the house? You can thank yeast for that. Now, yeast isn't just one thing. There are hundreds of different types of yeast out there, each with their own special talents. But today, we're going to focus on one superstar in particular, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or as it's more commonly known, baker's yeast. This little guy is a master of fermentation, transforming simple ingredients into complex and delicious flavors. And here's a fun little tidbit for you. Yeast is actually alive. That's right, every time you bake a loaf of bread, you're hosting a microscopic party in your dough. The yeast munches on the sugars in the flour, releasing carbon dioxide gas as a byproduct. This gas gets trapped in the dough, causing it to rise and giving bread its light and fluffy texture. So the next time you're biting into a piece of toast, remember, you're enjoying the fruits of a tiny fungus's labor. It might sound a little strange, but as they say, the proof is in the pudding, or in this case, the bread. Did you ever think you'd be thanking a fungus for that delicious loaf of bread? Well, life is full of surprises, isn't it? So now that we've met our tiny friend yeast, it's time to see it in action. Now that you're familiar with yeast, let's dive into its superpower, fermentation. Imagine you're at a party. You've got your plate loaded up with your favorite snacks, and you're ready to chow down. That's how yeast feels when it encounters sugar. It's a feast. And like some of us after a hearty meal, yeast also releases gas. This process, my friends, is what we call fermentation. In the simplest terms, fermentation is like a tiny party happening inside your dough. The yeast, which are microorganisms, start to consume the sugar present in the dough. And just like us, when yeast eats, it needs to get rid of waste too. But here's the kicker. Yeast doesn't head for the restroom. Instead, it releases two things as it breaks down sugar: carbon dioxide gas and alcohol. You might be thinking, wait, alcohol? In my bread? Don't worry, your morning toast isn't going to give you a buzz. Most of the alcohol evaporates during the baking process. Now, the carbon dioxide gas has nowhere to go. It gets trapped inside the dough, creating little pockets or bubbles. These bubbles are the reason why bread is light and fluffy, instead of being a dense brick. The yeast continues to party on, eating sugar and releasing gas, until there's no more sugar left or the temperature gets too hot for them. This usually happens when you put your dough in the oven. Here's a fun fact for you. The French word for fermentation is ferment, which comes from the Latin word fervere, meaning to boil. This refers to the bubbles produced during fermentation, which makes it look like the dough is boiling from the inside. So the magic of yeast and its fermentation process is what makes our bread rise. But how does this look in practice? Let's find out. Baking bread with yeast isn't just cooking, it's science in action. So let's embark on this culinary journey and witness the magic that yeast brings to our dough. First things first, we need to mix our ingredients. Picture yourself as a chemist concocting a potion. We start with flour, water, salt, and of course our star of the day, yeast. But remember, yeast is a living organism. They're tiny little creatures that are just waiting to be awakened from their slumber. As soon as we add warm water into the mix, it's like a wake-up call for our yeast. They spring into action, gobbling up the sugars in the flour. This process is called fermentation. Imagine a yeast party. They're all eating, dancing, and having a good time. But like any good party, there's always a bit of gas. In this case, it's carbon dioxide. This gas gets trapped in the dough, causing it to rise and expand. Now we wait. As our yeast continues their sugar feast, our dough is slowly rising. This is a crucial step in bread baking. You might be tempted to rush the process, but remember, the yeast needs time to party and produce the gases that will make our bread fluffy. So we need to wait patiently. It's like watching a slow and steady balloon inflation. Once our dough has doubled in size, it's time to preheat the oven. But here's the thing, as we heat our dough, the yeast party reaches its peak. They eat, they dance, they produce even more gas until eventually the heat gets too much. The yeast, having lived a short but fulfilling life, perishes, leaving behind their legacy in the form of a beautifully risen dough. And then the final transformation takes place. The heat from the oven causes the water in the dough to turn into steam, which expands and causes the bread to puff up even more. At the same time, the heat reacts with the sugars on the surface of the dough, resulting in a wonderful golden brown crust. This process is known as the Maillard reaction, named after the French chemist who discovered it. And voila, we have our bread, light, fluffy, and delicious. But let's not forget to pay homage to our yeast, the tiny organisms that worked tirelessly to transform simple ingredients into a culinary masterpiece. Their journey from the packet to our bread is a testament to the wonders of science and the magic that happens when we combine these elements in just the right way. So, there you have it. The journey of yeast from the packet to our delicious fluffy bread is complete. The science of baking bread is a fascinating process, a delicious dance of chemistry and biology. And the best part, we get to enjoy the fruits, or should we say the loaves of our labor. Happy baking! Wow, who knew that such a tiny organism could be so powerful and important in our daily lives? We've journeyed together through the fascinating world of yeast, a microscopic fungus that is a bread baker's best friend. We've learned that yeast is what gives our bread that delightful puffiness and the soft, airy texture that we all love. Let's take a moment to rewind and revisit the key takeaways from our exploration. We started by introducing yeast, a microorganism that's been around for billions of years. It's not just a baker's ally, but also a key player in the production of a variety of foods and beverages, from beer to wine to chocolate. Then we dived into the magical process of fermentation. Yeast, being the little foodie that it is, munches on the sugars in the dough, producing carbon dioxide gas and alcohol. This is fermentation in action. The carbon dioxide gets trapped in the dough, causing it to rise and expand, while the alcohol evaporates during the baking process. In the science of baking bread, we saw how the heat in the oven energizes the yeast, causing it to work even faster. As the bread bakes, the yeast eventually succumbs to the heat, but not before it's done its job. The end result? A beautiful risen loaf of bread with a golden crust and a soft, fluffy interior. So the next time you bite into a warm, toasty slice of bread, remember the microscopic yeast and the monumental role it plays in transforming simple ingredients into a culinary masterpiece. It's the unsung hero of the baking world, a testament to the fact that great things often come in small packages. And that, my friends, is the story of yeast and its role in bread making. A fascinating tale of science, nature, and gastronomy, wouldn't you agree? Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery today. Remember, the next time you enjoy a slice of bread, thank the tiny yeast for its big job. Stay tuned to Simplified Topics for more fun and learning.